Picture Britain before it was Britain. No parliament, no monarchy, no tea obsession, just Celtic tribes, hill forts, and constant small-scale warfare. Then Rome arrives in 43 AD under Emperor Claudius, not for sightseeing, for control. Roman legions build roads so durable that parts of Britain still drive on their layout today. They establish Londinium. They build Hadrian's Wall in 122 AD, not because they loved architecture, but because Scotland was aggressively unconvinced by Roman authority. For nearly 400 years, Britain is a Roman province. Taxes flow south. Soldiers patrol north. Bathhouses operate where sheep once stood confused. Then Rome collapses in the 5th century, and Britain is abruptly left unsupervised. Into that vacuum step the Anglo-Saxons, Germanic tribes who settle, farm, and divide the island into kingdoms. Wessex, Mercia, Northumbria. England begins forming not as a nation, but as a competitive group chat. Then the Vikings arrive in the late 8th century. Longships, axes, zero appointment scheduling. They raid monasteries first, because monks do not fight back well. Then begin settling large areas of eastern England. The Danelaw is established. Norse law, language, and culture mix with Anglo-Saxon traditions. Modern English still carries Norse fingerprints. Words like sky, egg, window. That's Viking branding that stuck. By the 10th century, a unified English kingdom finally stabilizes under kings like Alfred the Great and later Athelstan. And then 1066 happens. Remember to subscribe. King Edward the Confessor dies without an heir. 3 men claim the throne. Harold Godwin's son takes it first. He defeats a Viking invasion at Stamford Bridge in September 1066. 2 weeks later, William of Normandy lands in the south. Harold force marches his exhausted army nearly 250 miles. They meet at Hastings. Harold dies. William wins. This is not just regime change. It's elite replacement. William confiscates Anglo-Saxon lands and redistributes them to Norman loyalists. Castles rise across England. Stone reminders that rebellion is no longer encouraged. The Doomsday Book in 1086 catalogs land and wealth with meticulous detail. It's basically medieval surveillance infrastructure. English peasants speak Old English. The ruling class speaks Norman French. For centuries, legal and political vocabulary in England is French-based. Court, judge, parliament. That linguistic divide reflects power. England becomes centralized, feudal, and tightly administered. And now it's strong enough to cause problems abroad. From the 12th to 15th centuries, English kings hold vast territories in France. This dual claim guarantees conflict. The 100 Years' War begins in 1337, when Edward III claims the French throne. It becomes a generational conflict. England wins stunning early victories at Crécy, 1346, and Agincourt, 1415. The longbow devastates armored knights. Imagine bringing expensive cavalry to a ranged weapon fight. But France adapts. Joan of Arc rallies French forces in 1429, lifting the siege of Orleans and restoring morale. By 1453, England has lost almost all its French territories. The psychological shift is massive. England stops being half-continental and becomes fully island-focused. National identity strengthens. And then England nearly tears itself apart. 2 branches of the same royal family, York and Lancaster, fight over succession. 30 years of intermittent civil war follow. Kings are crowned, deposed, imprisoned, killed. Richard III dies in battle at Bosworth Field in 1485. Henry Tudor wins and becomes Henry VII. He stabilizes finances, strengthens royal authority, and marries strategically to unify factions. But his son, Henry VIII, changes everything. Henry VIII wants a male heir. Catherine of Aragon does not produce one. He requests an annulment from the Pope. Denied. Henry breaks from Rome in 1534 through the Act of Supremacy, establishing the Church of England. Monasteries are dissolved. Their land seized. Wealth flows to the crown. This is not theological curiosity. It's political consolidation. Under Elizabeth I, Protestant England faces Catholic Spain. The Spanish Armada attempts invasion in 1588. England's navy Faster ships, smarter tactics, defeats it. Naval dominance becomes national confidence. The sea shifts from defense to opportunity. By the 1600s, tension builds between monarchy and parliament. Charles I believes in divine right. Parliament believes in taxation rights. War breaks out in 1642. Oliver Cromwell's New Model Army defeats royalist forces. In 1649, Charles I is executed. A sitting monarch publicly beheaded by his own people. This shocks Europe. England becomes a republic under Cromwell. The Commonwealth. It doesn't last. Monarchy is restored in 1660, but the balance of power shifts permanently. After the Glorious Revolution of 1688, Parliament gains supremacy. The monarchy becomes constitutional. Power now flows through law, not divine claim. In 1707, England and Scotland unite formally as Great Britain. In 1801, Ireland joins, forming the United Kingdom. Meanwhile, overseas expansion accelerates. The British East India Company evolves into a commercial military force, controlling vast regions of India. The Royal Navy dominates global trade routes. Then the Industrial Revolution ignites in late 18th century Britain. Coal-powered steam engines transform production. Textile mills multiply. Railways reshape geography. Urban populations explode. By the mid-19th century, Britain controls roughly a quarter of the world's land and population. It is the largest empire in history. London becomes the financial capital of the planet. But industrial wealth also brings harsh labor conditions, class inequality, and urban poverty. Empire projects power. Industry builds infrastructure. Both generate tension. World War I drains Britain economically and demographically. Nearly 900,000 British soldiers die. The empire survives, but weakens. World War II tests survival. After France falls in 1940, Britain stands alone against Nazi Germany. The Battle of Britain becomes an air war for survival. The Blitz devastates London and other cities. But Britain holds. Victory comes in 1945. The empire does not. India gains independence in 1947. Decolonization accelerates across Africa and Asia. Britain transitions from imperial ruler to global partner. When World War II ends in 1945, Britain has technically won. It has also bankrupted itself doing so. Cities are scarred from bombing. Industry is exhausted. Rationing continues into the 1950s. The empire that once covered a quarter of the globe is no longer financially sustainable. Victory did not come with surplus. So Britain pivots. In 1948, the government establishes a National Health Service under Health Secretary Aneurin Bevan. Healthcare, for the first time, becomes free at the point of use. Doctors are no longer paid directly by patients. Hospitals are nationalized. Dentistry, prescriptions, surgeries, covered. This is not minor reform. It is structural redesign. A war-torn country decides that illness should not bankrupt its citizens. The NHS becomes more than policy. It becomes identity. Criticize the weather. Criticize the trains. Criticize Parliament. But criticize the NHS, and you've entered dangerous territory. Meanwhile, the monarchy adjusts. After the abdication crisis of 1936 and the war years under George VI, the crown shifts from governing authority to symbolic continuity. When Elizabeth II ascends the throne in 1952, she does not shape legislation. She represents stability in a country adjusting to post-imperial reality. The monarchy becomes a national anchor, ceremonial, televised, carefully choreographed. If medieval kings ruled by divine right, modern monarchs rule by ribbon cutting. As political power contracts globally, cultural power expands. The 1960s turned Britain into a cultural export machine. The Beatles cross the Atlantic and effectively invade the United States without needing a navy. The Rolling Stones follow. British fashion reshapes global style. London becomes shorthand for modernity. Later, Britain exports finance. The City of London evolves into one of the world's dominant financial hubs. Deregulation in the 1980s, the Big Bang of 1986, transforms London into a high-speed trading engine. The empire territory is gone. The empire of capital remains. But integration with Europe becomes the next question. Britain joins the European Economic Community in 1973. It votes in a 1975 referendum to stay. Over decades, economic and legal integration deepens. Regulations align. Borders soften. Trade accelerates. And then 2016 happens. The Brexit referendum divides a country almost exactly down the middle. 51.9% vote to leave the European Union. 48.1% vote to remain. The margin is narrow. The consequences are not. The debate reactivates an old instinct. Island sovereignty versus continental integration. For some, leaving the EU represents regained legislative independence. For others, it represents economic self-sabotage. Negotiations drag on for years. Trade agreements are rewritten. Supply chains are tested. Political leadership turns over rapidly. At one point, the country cycles through prime ministers with the energy of managerial speedrun. Brexit does something deeper than just trade terms. It reopens identity fractures. Scotland, which voted heavily to remain in the EU, revisits independence. The 2014 independence referendum had failed. 55% voting to stay in the UK, but the European question reshapes the argument. If the UK can leave a union, why can't Scotland? Northern Ireland faces a different challenge. The Good Friday Agreement of 1998 ended decades of violent conflict known as the Troubles. That peace depended, in part, on a soft border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. Brexit complicates that arrangement. New trade checks risk destabilizing carefully balanced political agreements. England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland remain under one state. But unity is no longer assumed. It is managed. Through all of this, Britain continues functioning. It hosts global events, maintains nuclear deterrence, operates one of the world's largest financial centers, exports culture relentlessly. The empire is gone. The factories no longer dominate global output, but the country has not vanished into irrelevance. It has compressed, shifted from territorial dominance to institutional and cultural influence. The United Kingdom in the 21st century is not the power it was in 1850, but it is also not the island it was in 500 AD. It is a constitutional monarchy with parliamentary sovereignty, a permanent seat on the UN Security Council, nuclear capability, and ongoing internal debates about what it wants to be. If there's a pattern across 2,000 years, it is this. When the structure stops working, Britain rewires it, sometimes calmly, sometimes dramatically, rarely without argument. The United Kingdom continues, not because it avoids tension, but because it absorbs it. The United Kingdom began as tribal land on a stormy island. It was Romanized, invaded, rewritten. It executed a king, industrialized the world, built the largest empire in history, survived 2 world wars, dismantled its own empire, and still debates its identity. It has never stayed static. When pressure builds, it restructures. When defeated, it pivots. When diminished, it reinvents. That island off Europe has never been quiet, and history suggests it never will be. From tribal land to global empire to Brexit debates in 2,000 years. That's not evolution. That's whiplash. Subscribe. Because next time, we zoom into the chapter where Britain ran a quarter of the planet, and it gets complicated.